This video is brought to you by Surfshark. Safety and security online are critically important, and you can protect yourself online with Surfshark. Get 83% off and 3 months for free through the link in the description below. And now today's video. It is a trite cliche of most pirate stories. A chest bursting with gold and jewels buried deep in a cave on a remote oceanic island. X marks the spot. When looking at the lives of the most famous buccaneers and corsairs of the Caribbean, they very rarely, if at all, hid their stashes of doubloons. They would rather squander them on new ships and weapons, or reinvest them wisely on rum, tobacco, and women. The idea of a buried pirate treasure may have been originated by a work of fiction, Treasure Island, by Robert Louis Stevenson, and yet Stevenson may have gotten some inspiration from a real-life place. Somewhere in the Pacific, a tiny tropical island may conceal piratical riches to the tune of more than $1 billion. This is the story of Cocos Island and the cursed lives of its treasure hunters. Cocos Island should not be confused with the Cocos Islands, also known as the Keating Islands. The Keating Archipelago is an Australian territory in the Indian Ocean, whereas today's destination is in the Pacific Ocean, and it belongs to Costa Rica. It's located some 297 nautical miles southwest of its administrative mainland. That's 342 miles or 550 kilometers. The surface of the island is only 9 square miles or 24 square kilometers. Despite its tiny size, Cocos boasts an astounding variety of animal and plant species. It contains 235 plant species, 400 different insects, and 100 species of birds. Its crystalline waters are home to sea turtles, corals, and 360 varieties of fish, mollusks, and crustaceans. Its bays are understandably very popular with scuba divers who come to admire hammerhead sharks, whale sharks, and giant manta rays. The island is also graced by the presence of fresh water, streaming in waterfalls and creeks as clear as diamonds. There are also plentiful coconut trees surrounded by a thick and lush jungle. It's no wonder then the Costa Rican government declared Cocos a national park in 1978 and UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 1997. What helped to preserve the natural environment of the island was the absence of permanent settlers for such a long period of its history. The island had been uninhabited for centuries until it was discovered by the Spanish explorer Juan de Cabezas in 1526. Since then, sailors, traders, and whalers have used Cocos as a rest stop for their travels. But the island was especially popular among a certain professional category: pirates. They headed to Cocos surely because of its natural beauty, natural springs, and endless supply of coconut water, which, once fermented, makes for an intoxicating drink. More than anything else, Cocos lacked a little something, and that something was Spanish soldiers. Hence the popularity of Cocos with oceanic criminals. It was a perfect place to rest, refit, and also hide ill-gotten gains. Let's now get into the meat of our story: the pirate treasures hidden and allegedly found on Cocos Island. First, a word of warning. The accounts about these booties are often convoluted, contradictory, confusing, and plain infuriating from a research standpoint. We've done our best here to seek out the most reliable sources and come up with a narrative that makes sense. If experts on Cocos Islands or piracy out there don't agree with our findings, please feel free to correct us in the comments and state your source if possible. The first alleged treasure made its way to Cocos in 1685 aboard a pirate ship wonderfully named Bachelor's Delight. The vessel was commanded by Captain Edward Davis. His second in command was William Dampier, and there was also the surgeon Lionel Wafer. The crew of the Delight had successfully blockaded and ransacked the city of Leon, Nicaragua, heading off into the Pacific with a sizable loot. We don't know much more about the treasure of Bachelor's Delight, so I'm going to skip to the next trove: the ill-gotten gains of Captain Bennet Graham. In the early 1800s, Captain Graham was a distinguished British naval officer in charge of surveying the coasts of the South Pacific aboard the HMS Devonshire. Apparently, being a coastal surveyor was not exciting enough for Bennett, and he drastically changed career paths, turning to piracy, of course. In 1818, Captain Graham was caught and executed, with most of his sailors being sent to a penal colony in Tasmania. One of his crew, a woman called Mary Welch, spent 20 years in prison, but on her release, she had some promising retirement plans in mind. She claimed to have a chart showing where Graham had buried his treasure. The stash amounted to 350 tons of gold bullion buried Of course, in Cocos. British colonial authorities in Tasmania believed her story and mounted an expedition to find the Devonshire gold. But in the previous 20 years, the layout of the island had changed so much that Mary could barely recognize it. Where was the huge cedar tree she had marked with an X on her map? With that and other landmarks gone, it was impossible to retrieve the treasure, and the expedition left Cocos empty-handed. Now, in some accounts of Cocos' pirates, Bennett Graham is said to have changed his name into the Spanish-sounding Benito Bonito. But in other stories, this rascal is a completely separate character, sometimes called Benito Bonito, Benito Benitez, Bonito Bonito, or some other variation of that same theme. We'll go with the version that the story narrated by a Colorado newspaper, Moffat County Courier, in December of 1911 went with. Benito, an assumed name, was a Spanish privateer of aristocratic origins who had fought in the Peninsular War. After Napoleon's defeat, he murdered a Portuguese captain and stole his vessel. He then seized an English ship in the West Indies, the Lightning, which he renamed the Relampago, which is Spanish for lightning. Well, 2 sailors of the Lightning asked to join Benito's crew. Their names were Bugs, Thompson, and Chappell. Sometime between 1818 and 1820, El Capitan Benito staged his criminal masterpiece. He learns a consignment of Spanish gold was to be transported by a company of soldiers to Acapulco. He and his men then ambushed the guards, wore their uniforms, and showed up to collect the gold. The perfect heist worth $300 million in today's money. And can you guess where the crew buried it? Cocos Island. But Benito's men were not happy. They wanted their part of the loot there and then. The luscious greenery of Cocos became the theatre of a bloody battle between Benito's loyal pirates and the mutineers. Armed with pistol and cutlass, the Spanish captain personally enriched the green backdrop with vivid splashes of red. After pretending to forgive the remaining 17 rebels, the crafty Benito abandoned them in Valparaiso, Chile. They were all captured and hanged, except for Bugs, Thompson, and Chappell, who offered to guide a British expedition against Benito in the Caribbean. The raid was successful, and with capture looming, Benito Bonito shot himself on the quarterdeck of the Relampago. The thought of Benito's gold may be mouth-watering, but it pales in comparison to the largest treasure known to be hidden in Cocos. In 1820, the Spanish viceroy in Lima, Peru, was preparing defenses against the revolutionary forces of José de San Martin, fighting for independence against Spain. The viceroy collected the vast treasure of Lima, which included the gold and silver reserves, as well as the jewels, statues, and other artifacts from the city's 50 churches. He then entrusted the valuables to a well-known and respected British merchant captain named William Thompson. No relation to the previous Bugs Thompson we've encountered, even though one source claims that they were actually the same person. Anyway, this Captain Thompson loaded the treasure of Lima into his ship, the Mary Dear, and set sail into the Pacific. His instructions were to keep traveling until the situation had normalized in Peru. But Thompson and his men must have felt the unease of sitting on such a hoard. They did the only reasonable thing. They slit the throats of the 6 viceroy guards on board and sailed towards Cocos to bury the treasure. The Mary Dear dropped anchor in Wafer Bay, named after the surgeon of the Bachelor's Delight. Here, Thompson distributed some of the spoils to the crew. Then, with the help of 2 sailors, he carried the bulk of the treasure on shore. He found the perfect hiding spot, a cave halfway between Wafer Bay and Chatham Bay, which, according to the Moffat County Courier, was also the home to the treasure of Benito Bonito. Thompson then fittingly rewarded the 2 sailors with their severance pay. Each received a ball of lead straight into their skulls, lest they reveal the location of the cave. The nefarious captain then set sail with the Mary Dear, planning to return when the heat had died down. But shortly after leaving Cocos behind, a Spanish gunboat gave chase and Thompson quickly surrendered. The entire crew was put on trial for piracy, found guilty, and sentenced to hang. All sailors were swung from the noose except for 2, Thompson and his first mate, who agreed to reveal the location of the treasure. Thompson and the mate returned to Cocos escorted by Spanish soldiers, but as soon as the party started the search, the 2 pirates gave them the slip and disappeared into the jungle. The soldiers looked for them for days before giving up and leaving in frustration. The escapees were presumed dead, but they survived for weeks, eating berries and eggs. The 2 scoundrels were eventually picked up by a whaler that had stopped at Cocos to stock up on water. They pretended to be shipwrecked sailors and were welcomed on board. The first mate was taken to Punta Arenas, Costa Rica, where he later died of yellow fever. But how about our main man, Captain Thompson? Now, just before we continue with today's video, let me tell you about today's fantastic sponsor, Surfshark. Do you use the internet? Of course you do. It's 2022. You also got personal information that you'd rather remain private and personal? Well, who doesn't? Well, let me tell you something. The internet's a weird place. There are people out there, they want to ruin your day. They want to take your details, steal your identity, etc. Surfshark has HackLock. This searches database for your passwords, which sounds bad, but don't worry. Surfshark are the good guys. If they see that your data has been linked, they'll be like, yo, your data got leaked, didn't it? Maybe you should do something about that. Also, what's great about Surfshark is, of course, its VPN features. That lets you get a whole bunch of streaming options that you didn't have before. Let's say you live in the US and you're like, well, Netflix is pretty good. Loads of options on there. Try hopping on a server from Europe or Asia or anywhere else, and you'll probably find that you get a whole lot of stuff that isn't available to you right now. Also, Surfshark is totally unlimited, so you can watch and download as much as you like. Of course, there are no logs, there's great support, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't like it. Go to surfshark.deals/geographics for 83% off and 3 extra months for free. It's now the year 1844. We're in an unconfirmed port city in Cuba. A Canadian sailor named John Keating has just arrived in town, thirsty for adventure, money, and booze. He soon meets a new friend who may quench all 3 desires. That man is no other than William Thompson. Thompson took a liking to Keating, and the 2 sea dogs bonded until the former captain made a shocking revelation to the Canadian. He would point him to the fabled treasure of Lima. By 1846, Keating had recruited a crew and launched an expedition co-led by one Captain Bogue. The 2 landed in Cocos and apparently found the treasure near Wafer Bay, or at least a treasure, part of a treasure. In fact, Bogue and Keating retrieved only a small quantity of gold coins and jewels. Bogue stuffed his share in his boots and pockets, which sealed his doom. While boarding a rowboat, the added weight caused him to drown in the surf. Well, that's what Keating said. It's plausible that the Canadian sailor just straight up murdered his partner. Over what happens next, we only know that Keating arranged a second expedition. This time he returned with the equivalent of $4 million in today's money. Not bad at all, but that would be just a fraction of the treasure of Lima. Why didn't he recover more? Keating revealed that a mutinous crew prevented him from collecting the remaining hoard, which he described in great detail on his deathbed. One chest, for example, contained 4,000 Spanish doubloons and 5,000 gold Mexican crowns. Another contained 1,244 altar ornaments, including chalices coated with gemstones. And then there were more containers teeming with thousands of diamonds, rubies, topazes, solid gold candelabra, and relic containers. To top it all off, a 7-foot-tall statue of the Virgin Mary with the baby Jesus in solid gold. The Virgin was adorned with 1,684 jewels and 7 crosses made of diamonds. It's no wonder then that hundreds of expeditions were mounted after Keating's death to recover this mouth-watering trove. The next noteworthy treasure hunt was led by Captain William Tucker in September 1869. This explorer did not find anything, but he is remembered for tagging along to the official expedition ordered by Dr. Jesus Jimenez Zamora, president of Costa Rica. It was with that mission that Dr. Zamora took possession of Cocos Island in the name of the Costa Rican government people. Tucker's footsteps were followed by a German sailor, Captain August Gistler. But now we must take a step back for a second. Remember the first mate of Captain Thompson, the one who died of yellow fever? Well, according to some sources, he survived the disease and moved to Kona, Hawaii, assuming the name of Makoma, also known as Old Mac, to his drinking buddies. In 1888, Gistler landed in Kona and met Old Mac. Surely, over endless shots of whiskey, the ancient mariner told a wondrous tale about a buried Spanish treasure in Wafer Bay. Gistler was so convinced by his tale that he first moved to Costa Rica in 1889 and then decamped to Cocos. For the following 20 years, the obsessed Gistler gave all he had to finding the treasure, combing every square meter of the territory. The Costa Rica government was so impressed by his tenacity, they gave him a commission as governor of the islands with permission to establish and manage a colony. Yet, by 1908, Gistler had to admit defeat. He had poured all his energy, time, and money into an unattainable dream. He left Cocos for good and died completely broke in New York in 1935. 3 years after Gistler's departure, Cocos was visited by one Captain Frederick Hackett. He sailed off Eagle Harbor, Washington, at the helm of the bark Hesperus. His story was told by our friends at the Moffat County Courier in December of 1911, who described Hackett as a bluff, ruddy, bearded old sea dog, hale and vigorous despite his 70 years. That's the most piratical description I've ever read, by the way. It smells like rum and probably scurvy. According to Moffat, Hackett and his older brother Thomas had been friends with John Keating, the old treasure hunter. Shortly before his death in 1883, Keating had drawn up a map of the island leading to the jewels and gold of Lima. 2 years later, Thomas Hackett had sailed to Cocos for a first attempt, but he had died in Havana, Cuba, of yellow fever. It was now time for that ruddy Frederick to break the curse of Cocos and find the treasure. Hackett raised $100,000 from investors, equivalent to $2.8 million in today's money. With these funds, he fitted and staffed the Hesperus and purchased some state-of-the-art hydraulic mining equipment. The only thing we know about his attempt is that it was fruitless. The American press reported about Cocos treasure hunting once again on the 13th of April 1932. The New York Times announced the composition of the next search party. Sir Malcom Campbell, automobile speed king. Campbell, in fact, was a racer who held both the land and water speed records during the 20s and 30s. Next up, Colonel J.E. Leckie, CMG, DSO, CBE, without forgetting FRGS. We did not check his whole resume, but we found that he had a degree in mining engineering and was a veteran of both the Anglo-Boer War and World War I. The last mission lead was W.S. Clayton, inventor of the Clayton metallophone. In our dictionary, metallophone is an alternative spelling for metallophone, which is a type of large xylophone. But according to the New York Times, Clayton's invention was some contraption which could locate the Lima Ridges. So, there you have them, a cast of characters worthy of the best 1930s cliffhanger film serials: the adventurer, the stern military man, and the oddball inventor. Did they succeed? Well, I'm sure they found some friends along the way, let's put it that way. Campbell certainly found a publishing contract along the way. He narrated the unsuccessful expedition in his memoir, Searching for Pirate Treasure in Cocos Island. Maybe it was about time that some professionals got involved, the members of the California Society for Archaeological Investigations, who may have found the treasure. At least according to a short article published by The Examiner of Launceston, Tasmania, Australia, on the 8th of January 1940. As we know, around that time, nothing of note was happening around the world. Sarcasm, by the way. So The Examiner filled in a slow news day by reporting on a message by Mr. Sidney Fields, the Costa Rican consul. On November of 1939, the California archaeologists had sailed to Cocos. According to Mr. Field, they had found the treasure valued at a whopping $60 million, which is about $1.153 billion in today's money. The expedition, however, reported that the treasure was buried so deeply that they had to return to California to secure digging equipment. We couldn't find any further mention of that voyage. The next documented stab at finding that solid gold Madonna happened in 1949. The Costa Rican government received a letter from San Diego resident Paul Stashwick, who claimed to have been shipwrecked near Cocos in 1931. Having found safety on shore, Stashwick had located the treasure. He offered to lead a government-funded search party and claimed he didn't want to make 1 cent out of the venture. His only wish was for the pieces stolen from Peruvian churches to be returned to their rightful place. Was he onto something? Well, we'll never know, as the government archived the letter and never replied. In the 1980s, Cocos Island was visited several times by Jacques Cousteau, the legendary French explorer, diver, oceanographer, and filmmaker. He fell in love with it, describing it as the most beautiful island in the world. Cousteau dedicated his efforts to filming the local schools of sharks, which appeared in his 1988 documentary, Sharks of Treasure Island. During filming, members of his crew had to go at finding the Lima Trove with an underwater pulse induction metal detector. Again, no success, but their intuition was right. Modern technology was the key to finding the buried gold. In 1996, Costa Rican historian Raul Arias proposed the Ministry of Energy and the Environment to use air images system technology. In other words, he wanted to enlist help from NASA and their satellite imagery. The government did not sanction the plan, which ended up being put in place by a private citizen. In 1998, an optical technology firm called Alcor International received a commission from one Alan David Shepard. They were to acquire satellite images of Cocos Islands using a technology called geovision, which allowed them to identify particles of specific metals. Gold, for example. Mr. Shepard was almost a namesake for Alan Bartlett Shepard, the first American in space. That might explain why Alcor obliged the request. The company's technicians found evidence of 3 gold deposits, 1 under the waters of Wafer Bay and 2 on land. When Mr. Shepard received an invoice for $10,000, he promised to involve the Costa Rican government in San Jose, and they would foot the bill. As far as we know, Alcor is still 10 grand short, and no other action was taken. As we know, San Jose had declared Cocos to be a national park in 1978 to protect its natural habitat and fauna. Worried about the havoc caused by gold diggers in the 2010s, the government forbade further expeditions. Yet, in 2012, British and Canadian media reported that engineer Sean Whitehead was preparing a major archaeological survey using ground-penetrating radar and snake cameras. Whitehead had obtained a special 6-month permission to conduct the inspection, but while he waited for a TV production company to sort out things on their end, the permit lapsed and was not renewed. Another promising attempt just dead in the water. Since then, there have been more stories of how the treasure of Lima has been recovered. But according to Jenna Marie Davis from adventure diving company Undersea Hunter Group, this may be misinformation purposefully spread by treasure hunters trying to throw other treasure hunters off the track. It's also possible that the Costa Rican government created some fake news to divert attention away from Cocos and preserve its natural riches. In recent times, in fact, the presence of overnight visitors is forbidden on the island. Only scuba divers are allowed for short trips in its pristine bays, and only park rangers can live on Cocos while protecting the natural reserve. If the 1 billion stash from Lima and other treasures are indeed still present on Cocos Island, we hope that hunters and explorers will leave this UNESCO heritage site alone. Ill-conceived expeditions have not only endangered species and their habitats, but have also exacted a significant toll in terms of human life. We've only explored the major events surrounding the island, and even so, the Cocos curse has racked up a significant body count. 4 captains lost to execution, suicide, drowning, and disease, 6 slain Spanish soldiers, 2 pirates shot, 2 entire crews executed by hanging, and a German governor left broke and broken. Instead of considering digging up those 1,684 jewels, how about just playing the lottery? So I really hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.